After the premiere of the TV show Cheers, the song Where Everybody Knows Your Name immediately made the US and British top pop charts. It received an Emmy Award in 1983, and years later, the very similar magazines Rolling Stone and Reader's Digest, respectively, named the song the best and the greatest TV tune of all times. Now, I don't think it's just because it was so tuneful that people really want to go where everybody knows their name. For those of you who did not watch the show, how many of you watched the show? You Unitarian Universalists, we all watch those kinds of shows, don't we? Wasn't it wonderful? For those of you who didn't, however, I'll let you know that Cheers was all about a nice little bar in Boston where the owner, Sam Malone, former baseball star, and a slew of regular customers, Norm, Cliff, Dr. Fraser, Carla, and Woody, get together a few hours every day. They talk about life's problems, they laugh at each other's flaws, and they support each other in every way. It was an amazing phenomena in TV history. And I was a real fan. I didn't miss a program. But I just learned that you can still live stream it on CBS online. Of course, wanting to do due diligence for my research for the sermon, I have to admit I watched all the 10 free episodes. But you can sign up for all of them, pay for it, and see 275 of them. So, if you watch the show, you remember when the episode begins and a big burly fellow walks in the door, and what do the people, he says, "Hey everybody," and what do they say? Norm, that's right. Every single time that happens in all the 10 episodes that I watched, it brought a tear to my eyes and a smile to my face, and I was pulled into the story every time because I wanted to be Norm. I used to have a great memory for names. When I was a director of religious education for about a dozen years up in Washington State, I had about 100 children in my program. I remembered all their names, all their parents' names, some of the grandparents' names, and even their pets' names. Oh no, not anymore. I've heard that this is one of the first things to go. In my own church, my tiny little church with 30 members, I sometimes even forget their names. So I like it when people wear their name badges. I'd like to invite you, as you are comfortable now, to join in a little exercise, and don't worry, there are no memory tests of names or anything else to be given. I'm going to hit this little ringy-dingy, and I would like you to find a partner somewhere close to you, or if you're not wanting to stand or move around, raise your hand and somebody may come to you to be your partner. So when I hit this, you're going to have 1 minute to tell your partner something about one of your names. It could be your first name, your last name, your middle name. It could be a nickname. And then after a minute, I'm going to ring the dinghy again, and you're going to switch partners, and you're going to have a minute, and then I'll ring it, and we'll be done. So let's find a partner first. And now let's begin. Switch. I know it went very quickly, didn't it? Okay, friends, we need to wrap it up. This is the hard part, actually stopping, talking to somebody new or somebody you've known for years, finding out something about their name. And thank you, DJ. I loved Phantom of the Opera. Did y'all notice that? He had all kinds of stuff in that medley. That was fabulous. So next time you see each other on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday evening or at any other activity here, you might know a little bit more about the person with whom you engaged today. And I invite you to do more of that at the coffee hour afterwards and maybe even into the future. It's a fascinating thing how we came about to have our names. Here's another tidbit about Cheers. It was founded in 1969 as the Bull and Finch Pub. Dark paneled, fun, inspiration for the TV show, Cheers. It is still just a couple of blocks from 25 Beacon Street, which was the headquarters of the UUA for many, many years. The people at the pub at Cheers, Bull and Finch, knew us, and we knew them. In fact, we knew them well enough that they knew sometimes what we drank and what our names were. I know Tara spent a lot of time back in Boston, and I did too. And I frequented Cheers. I don't know if you did, but I certainly did. And I kept my Cheers mug for years. In fact, I still drink my soy vanilla latte out of that Cheers mug every morning. So speaking of church, because I'm always speaking of church, because I love church, if I weren't a minister, I would be active in a UU church somewhere. Certainly if I lived in Pasadena or the environs, I'd be active here. Reverend Tara has a fabulous ministry, and you are all wonderfully welcoming people in this awesome building with this delightful garden surrounding you. I might work in the garden, I might sing in the choir, I might work with the children, I might get involved in social justice because all of those things have been really important for me. By the way, did you know that singing with others releases pleasure-producing endorphins, as well as oxytocin, which lowers stress and wards off anxiety and depression? We get to do that every day, every Sunday here. Singing also bonds people together with others in a very unique way. Quite literally, it turns out, studies show, that the heartbeats of those people who regularly sing together beat in time with each other. Isn't that incredible? They beat in sync. There's a feeling of connection and trust with the others with whom you're singing. Group singing has been shown to reduce loneliness, which is what we do here several times a week, and certainly on Sundays. Of course, we all heard that the percentage of the population attending church has drastically declined, and so churches are looking, and religious institutions, to see why that is. It's a little bit less in Unitarian Universalism, especially today when people are flocking to us because of our values. From the studies that they have made about church attendance, they've come to interesting conclusions. They found that it's not a lack of belief in something more than you are, something that I like to call larger than ourselves. Some people would call it God. In fact, survey after survey tells us that people still do believe in something more than themselves. It could be nature. It could be community. It could be the divine. One of the biggest reasons, it seems, that people are not attending church is because they report they're just too busy. Many say they're getting their social needs met in another way, but they're finding that's not really so true. They may not have social connections of community at all, and that's a problem. More people report that they're lonelier than ever before. When asked if they have people in their lives that they could call at a moment's notice, in an emergency, or to share a joy, it was a few years ago that they could count on one hand 5 people. Then a couple of years ago, 3 people. Today, 1 people or not even 1 person at all. You may have read too about the rise of addictions in our population, especially the opioid addiction epidemic, to drugs, to alcohol, to all kinds of other things as well. One of the most likely causes for addictions is loneliness. In an experiment, a rat is put into a cage. It has nothing to do but drink a drugged water little filter that comes down into the cage, like a drip feeder. In another cage, one rather lush, filled with colorful balls and tunnels through which to scamper, and plenty of other rats, everything a rat about town could possibly want. It also had a drip feed of drugs and a drip feed of water. Interestingly enough, those socialized rats had nothing to do with the drugged water. They went to the water feeder, the plain water feeder. The experimenters thought maybe it had something to do with just rats, until they looked at something akin to what it is in our human experience. During the Vietnam War, Time magazine reported the use of heroin was as common as chewing gum with the soldiers. A full 20% of the soldiers had become addicted before they came home. The Army was terrified about what this would mean to their families, their loved ones, their friends, their communities. But it seems that 95% of them simply stopped, although some with rehab. They had indeed shifted from a terrifying cage, the war experience, back to a pleasant one, back to their families, their loved ones, the familiar. That was so interesting to me. This discovery is a profound challenge both to the right-wing view that addiction is a moral failing caused by too much hedonistic partying, and the liberal view that addiction is a disease taking place in a chemically hijacked brain. In fact, the experimenters found addiction is an adaptation. Addiction is your cage. So the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. It is human connection. Why not just go hiking with friends on a Sunday morning and commune with nature? My goodness, there's these beautiful mountains and these lovely parks in this area. Or maybe you could join some civic organization. That'd be pretty good, too. Well, for one thing, there's not so many of those old civic organizations left thriving anymore. My dad was a moose, and I think his wife, my mom, was a moosette. Church provides so much of what all of these organizations together provide under one beautiful roof. There are certainly non-church attending folks who are self-motivated and find ways to give of themselves and serve their communities. But many of us find we don't always follow through on our intention to get directly involved, contributing our time, our talent, and our treasure to what we feel is larger than ourselves, to what is worthwhile, unless we're encouraged to do so, perhaps by our pastor, perhaps by other people in the congregation who invite you to come along. We engage in social justice here because it is the right thing to do. It's for reasons beyond our heads. It's reasons in our hearts. Perhaps here we are acknowledging that something larger than ourselves, by whatever name you call it, for a purpose beyond ourselves. A. Powell Davies, one of our most famous Unitarian ministers, great speaker, renowned social activist, who spurred the growth of our faith in the 1950s, said that church is a place where we go to grow our souls. Church is a place where we go to grow our souls. I think that's a lovely statement. In my reading about why people go to church, much was found in the way of the Christian blogs. Of course, reasons in the Christian blogs given were statements of faith, belief in God, taking the sacraments. However, repeatedly there was much more about human connection. One young woman's story could just as well have been told by anybody that's sitting in one of these pews. She mentioned coming into the church building on Sunday morning, hearing her name called out, followed by a hug, both of which she said are really placeholders for the conversations that may unfold later, today at coffee hour, next week, next month, whenever the persons are ready to share their stories. She said, we engage in all the small talk because it precedes our heart talks. She continues saying going to church kind of bugs her because we don't go to church, she says, we are the church. And even though it's messy and sometimes imperfect, even though I've let them down, even though there are disappointments, even though I don't agree with everybody and sometimes people just think I'm plain out crazy, I don't think we need an official Sunday morning thing to be part of, because we come to this church. We are this church. We come here to cross a lot of our self-made boundaries. And she says, I keep choosing this small family out of hope, out of joy. Does this sound like something familiar to any of you? She mentions, too, wanting to reclaim the heritage of her faith, in her case, Christianity, which could be just as well said by anybody out here about our 400 years of heritage of Unitarian Universalism. And finally, she says, even when she falls short of her ideals, she can practice, she can learn, she can start all over again. It is amazing grace. And here, people can pray for you. Yes, even in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. When we share our stories, when we light our candles, these are small but sacred acts because we are alone and together. We do send our good thoughts and our love and our vibrations to those people who need to hear the good word, to help them through their sorrow, to lift them up in joy. In this broken and often disheartening world, attending here at Troop Memorial UU Church, this intentional community, it feels like a radical act of faith. It's truly a spiritual discipline. We show up. We talk with each other. We sing together. After service, we share coffee and tea and conversation, and we remember who we are as a people. Who we are as a people, connected to one another by head and by heart. It's a people of a living historic faith and why we live the way we do. We do this because we are the love people. We who stay together and we who find our way home together, where everybody knows your name, and we're awfully glad you came. Amen, and blessed be.